Friargate, the street, is probably the finest Georgian street in the East Midlands.
We have to do everything we can to preserve Friargate as it was 100 years ago.
I would think that the old Friargate area is an iconic landmark to Derby.
Victorian engineering at its best.
There is so much that ought to be made of Friargate, and at the moment it's what I call the forgotten quarter. The Great Northern Railway and the Friargate line were really important for helping Derby's economy thrive because it was being choked by the price it was having to pay for coal being brought in by the Midland Railway, and it was only when the competition started with the Great Northern that the price of coal came down and the factories could really work economically.
There was an Act of Parliament granted to bring the railway through, which was really driven by coal, which was the oil boom of its day. There was a really strong urge to have a competitor to the Midland Railway to get coal out of the East Derbyshire and West Nottinghamshire coalfields. This Act of Parliament was granted, which gave the railway company pretty much carte blanche to do what it liked, driving a swathe through Derby and demolishing quite a lot of property, including the really sort of cramped, some of the really cramped streets in the West End. And the whole thing of Friargate Bridge being as elegant as it is because Friargate was a historic street already and had lots of really handsome Georgian houses and well-to-do residents who did not want an ugly railway bridge there. The Friargate line, I believe, was cut amongst the other beaching cuts when it was no longer economically viable. I suppose people had cars and there was a lot more road haulage and it just didn't work the same anymore.
My contact with the site was to be one of the people who travelled on the last regular train from Nottingham Victoria into Derby Friargate station on Saturday the 5th of September 1964. It left Nottingham, I think, at about 10:30. It got into Derby Friargate at 5 minutes past 11. I really haven't got a great deal of recollection of what the last train was like. I think it was busy. I know it was a corridor train, and when we got to Derby, I think the station was quite busy when we got off. And there, I think my memory fails because I was too concerned about getting back home to Nottingham. A single ticket, which I bought for the final journey, again from Nottingham Victoria to Derby Friargate, cost, I believe, 2 and 2pence, which is again about 15 or 16 pence in today's money. In those days, it was quite a lot of money, particularly for a student. I came back to Derby in 1969 to the Teacher Training College. We had accommodation in a hall of residence on New Toxteth New Road, and we could still hear the railway in the background because at those times it was being used as a test track for British Rail. And I believe the bonded warehouse was actually used as a depot for the locomotives and other wagons that were being tested on the track up through Mickleover. So the line was still being used in those days.
The Friargate Goods Yard site is really interesting. It's been a big site which has been empty for 50 years. It has a fabulous bonded warehouse on there which really deserves restoration in such a way that it can be viewed from all sides. So I wouldn't like to see it redeveloped with blocks of flats around it, and so it was difficult to see. The arches are a different matter. They're in a fairly poor state of repair, and that shows with the roofs. And arches are expensive to renovate, and even if you manage to do it, there's not a lot you can do in the confines of an arch. They're quite the inside of them is quite small. Then there's the bridge itself. The bridge is in a poor state of repair, but it's well. It can easily be it can be restored in quite a straightforward manner if one has got enough money. I think the tricky bit as far as the Friends of Friargate Bridge is concerned is finding a use for the whole area. At the moment, a lot of the site is taken up with car parking space, but beyond that, there was a lot of undergrowth and trees that hid a multitude of sins and sinners.
As always happens when you have a derelict site, the vandals come in and things have got vandalised. People have set up various encampments, unfortunately involving fires sometimes, and things get dumped there. And there've been little areas where there's been a lot of drug taking, and the longer it goes on, the worse it gets, really, gradually.
There is some absolutely splendid street art, if you like. Some would say graffiti, but that's being a bit unfair. Down at the far end of the site, some of it is magnificent. And I'm a person who hates graffiti, but street art I can admire. But Clowes have recently done quite a lot in trying to tidy up the site. But there are parts of it which, in fact, it would be a shame to tidy up, because there's some quite rare flora and fauna along the top, particularly along the top of the arches. One of the things that steam locomotives used to do, well, in fact, what trains used to do, was collect seeds from plants as they went through embankments, and then they'd carry those along the line. So we've actually got some very rare flowers up on the top of the arches, which, if we're not careful, we're going to lose if the place is redeveloped. But you know, that part of Derby does deserve better. I just hope that whatever development there is done sensitively to remember the heritage. I mean, the Bonded Warehouse must be the one of the best railway buildings in Derby, and is at least the equal of the Roundhouse. It needs to be looked after and redeveloped in an appropriate way.
It's just very sad to see such dereliction, and again so near to the middle of Derby. I don't know why, in one sense, it's such a difficult site to develop, because it's in a very good location. It's so near to the city centre, and the buildings themselves are lovely, but the money that's going to need to be spent to restore the buildings is quite large. And so, if you put up a completely new building, you would probably have a smaller cost to recoup than if you restore old buildings like that.
I would think that the old Friargate area is an iconic landmark to Derby. Not just because it's the biggest hot spot for spray painting, but also because of its historical significance. I mean, I only just discovered on first year at some point that it was part of the railway. So it was kind of exciting to find out about that and everything with it.
The plan to put the school there has been a real stimulus, which hopefully will lead to development of the rest of the site. partly because just selling part of the land has brought in some money which hopefully can be used by Clowes for the development, and also because it's increased the focus on the rest of the site, and I think it's generally recognised that having a derelict site with antisocial behaviour right next to a school is not a great idea. So there's a lot more pressure on the developer to develop the rest of the site. When you go up there now, there's an air that things are changing and preparations are being made to make something of the site.